You're serious about your goals, and the RP Diet app is here to help. It creates a diet for your specific needs, lets you choose your favorite foods, and tells you exactly how much of them to eat and when. Expert System AI guides you along to keep you on track to your goals. For less than $15 a month, you have one of the most powerful diet coaches in your pocket. Cutting-edge data science tailored to your exact goals. The future is here today.
Folks, we're back again. We should wrap up all these RP Plus questions today. I'm hoping we get through it. Dr. Mike, how's it going?
Doing well. We're ready to wrap up RP Plus and open the floodgates to YouTube next time.
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, folks, we're just going to get right to it and start handling business here. I got a bunch of bullshit open that I probably should close. There we go.
Oh! I saw
right.
your emails. So did YouTube. Okay,
There.
let's get started. Rafael Sorge says, RP James, Dr. James, Dr. Mike, it's RP James. No joke today. Capybaras is nothing to joke for. That's a killing machine.
They are killing machines. Dude, every time, if you go on, folks, if you are bored, go on Instagram and just look at capybara pictures because they are friends with all members of the animal kingdom. You'll see them hanging out with like crocodiles, or I don't know if they're crocodiles or alligators, whatever, but they're all over the place. They're hilarious.
Okay, he continues. Is a mixture of guinea pig with dog personality. Near I live is full of them. It is incredibly flavored.
You guys eat them?
But you have to kill them from afar because if it gets too close, you can't do it because they're so cute and friendly, or you could if you are a psycho. Never killed anything, and if I had to do it myself, probably go vegetarian, but I do not, so I eat a lot of meat. This animal is really chill. Too much sometimes, but they have really don't give a fuck personality and are very affectionate as a giant rodent. Their meat is like alligator, if one of you have eaten those. Yep, actually I have. There's a blend of chicken, deer, and lemon in the taste, and really tender like ostrich, which I really encourage you to try both. If you've never did, is awesome. Brazil meat scene is amazing. Yeah,
so I've heard.
All right. I'm done with the diet. I posted a picture making advertising as a thanks for the knowledge you allow me to steal from your brain's paradox. And now finally we'll go to my questions. All right. In concerns of libido, I'm done with the diet. Lost 12 kilogram and mostly in total, mostly fat. I'm start eating more, but my libido is still wackish. This is probably normal because I'm not that worried about it, but I would like some perspectives with the only calorie content will be enough to become normal, or do I need to increase the fats? I'm eating 0.6 body weight in fats and weigh 67 kilograms for now. I think that your libido should re-norm as long as you're not ultra super crazy psycho lean. I think you should be totally good. So I think that, yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. All right. And let's see, moving on. Other question is it possible that I will never normalize body fat? Possible to never normalize because the body fat is lower. I'm in the 12% zone. Not that I think it will be, just for curiosity's sake. I want in the future to keep 8 or 10% if I can handle it without too much effort, like with eating plenty of fat, calories. Supposedly would be normal for most people, right? Of course, in a reasonable range like the above, if you can maintain a lean physique without absurdly amount of exercise, what's the fatigue ultimately will be unable to express the sex drive either way opinion. I think that if you stay in that 10% range or above, I don't think you have much to fear with sex drive being perennially suppressed, especially if you take a nice little diet break and maybe gain 1% or 2% and then slowly lose it with an upcoming diet. Then I don't think sex drive should be a problem that you're going to have. I would be very surprised if your sex drive was chronically lower at 10% body fat than it was at 15 or at 20. And then, in fact, many people report quite the opposite once they've renormalized. Where sex drive starts to become a problem is long periods of dieting in any body fat, extremely reduced calories for any amount of time. And if you're like below 8 to 10%, then anything down there, you might not have a ton of sex drive with. James, anything to add to that?
I think the there are a lot of numbers that you can kind of go off of, which is what we're talking about here. But ultimately, this might be an individualization thing where you might be able to hang out at that lower body weight without a ton of fuss, but you also might feel shitty at the same time. So it's kind of hard to say. I think from a numbers standpoint, if you did a good maintenance phase and you were able to bring your calories back up and you can stay that lean and you feel good, I think it's totally doable. But at the same time, there are plenty of people where just being that lean is not sustainable for a variety of reasons, and that's perfectly okay too. So just keep that in mind. It's not if you find that your sex drive is not rebounding, even though you are seemingly doing everything right, maybe it's just not meant to be in terms of holding on to that level of body composition and your sex drive goals. So that's when when body comp wins out or when sex drive wins out, they're going to have to shift a little bit one way or another.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of individualization there. All right, next question. In other regard, is it possible to reach like MRV in the upper chest but not the other fibers? I got onto tracking rep sets and weight, and that makes a lot of differences. It's so much easier to estimate things and intellectually think about stuff if you have proper data. But from the data arises this question, like if I'm doing an incline press Smith machine and now at 15 sets per week of upper chest and flat bench 12 sets, last week I added weight to upper and was all good, but with the same week I did 4 reps less. The flat bench was up for the same load. My program is focused on triceps. So the day before I upped the weight and reps and sets, and it was okay below me reps out of the water with some number of sets with them last week. Of course, current exercises are machine dips, 15 sets and cable overhead tricep extensions, 12 sets, weight and reps going up in both, but they preclude the chest training, which is the next day, but so far so good. Last week I have a minor pinch in the front delt. Is this MRV but only for upper pecs? I have this week and one more week and the deload is coming. So James and I don't like to conclude MRV based on one shot at it. We like multiple shots. So you get to a certain volume and you start to have performance decrements. Maybe that's MRV. Maybe it's just 50 other complex factors. Just luck of the draw or some kind of thing where your program is designed sort of poorly and your front delts are too tired. It makes it look like your upper chest is too tired. So I'd say change the program a little bit and then expose your lower fibers and upper fibers again to an incrementally higher level of volume. And then at some point you're going to reach another plateau of strength and a decline. And once you reach the plateau of strength, then you might be in a position to say, oh, wow, it happened pretty much at the same number of sets or something very similar. You know, now we're more confident that's probably MRV. And if it's a very, very big difference between that for your lower pecs and your upper pecs, that's totally a possibility. So it's absolutely possible. I just wouldn't be confident one run at it is going to conclude that. James?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Dr. Mike here, but just to play around with the question, is it like possible that you can, overreach some parts of the fibers within a muscle and not others? Like, yes, it's feasible that you could do that. Is it practically significant? I would say no at that point, because what are you going to do? What's the there's so much overlap from most of the chest movements that you do that it's very impractical to think that you could actually continue doing chest training while only part of your chest is overreached and part of it is not. At that point, that's like one of those where I think Mike and I would both laugh if we saw a paper that was published and said like, look, you can overreach some of the muscle, but not all of the muscle. Huge practical implications for hypertrophy. We'd be like, this is like a laboratory phenomenon, not like a gym real world phenomenon. So it's a good thought experiment, but the outcome is ultimately the same, which Dr. Mike already talked about. We're not even clear if that is the outcome, but if it was, what are you going to do about it? You're going to have to deload because you can't train chest at that point anymore.
Yeah. I mean, you could from the front end of a program at the beginning, program a little bit more horizontal pushing stuff and a little bit less vertical pushing stuff. If your vertical gets tired faster. But other than that, man, it's just, it's kind of how the cookie crumbles. And there's a lot of cross contamination between those two. So,
yeah.
All right. I have a problem. I would like to leg press, and Mike and I saw the video from leg pressing, but I have a problem in the Achilles tendon. They are not flexible at all. I have to use very big leverage to squat and leg press. I cannot keep my heels on the pad. I would like some pointers on how to fix these or some method to do other exercises and be effective. Is there a problem to let the heels pull out and exert force? Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't let your heels come up. That's a recipe for instability, lower force production, potentially injury. The only two exercises I can do is squat motion is lunges that I enjoy because I don't need anything, and squats, which I need a very large thing, block basically to set my heels onto. By the way, he says heels. He spells it R-E-E-L-S.
I was like, wait, what?
So Brazilian.
Oh, it's good. I didn't catch that.
It was in Portuguese pronounced heels, actually. So, okay. Me to go with a greater range of motion. I'm very limited and would like some pointers. Even so, with this limitation, my legs grow well. I think I have some good leg genetics, but I would like some more exercise variability. Media start to get beat up for this type of limitations. I would say I would try Bulgarian rear foot elevated split squats. That would be a good idea. I would try messing around with your foot position. So a wider stance can often get you a bigger depth, still hit your quads while still letting you keep your heels on the pad. Changing the leg press angle, putting some kind of pad underneath your butt to get the higher angle is probably a good idea. Trying hack squats with various foot positions is a good idea. I would try all of those. And if you want to rewatch that YouTube leg press technique guide video that I made, I go through some of those recommendations there.
Yeah, those are all solid recommendations. And you can always try changing up some other things. Like you can do like exaggerated mind muscle connection protocols where you're adding like slow eccentrics, pauses, like peak contractions, things like that on top of the techniques that you already feel really comfortable with if you don't want to like try a bunch of new stuff that you're not totally sure how it's going to go. So I think any of those would be great.
Then he says, thanks, guys. Keep up the good work. Thanks for the help, as always, and for allowing the promotion vulture to stay making idiotic questions and fucking around for 1 more month. Amazing.
That was a good series.
All right. Nicholas H. Hey, guys, can you explain how to adjust your lifting volume to balance it with increases in endurance volume? I'm training for a military program, has some substantial endurance requirements, but strength remains important for injury prevention and moving around heavy stuff. My endurance plan is 6 months long. It begins with a weekly volume of 4 hours in total running, swimming, and rucking. Peak endurance volume is 9.5 hours. 10 to 20% of weekly volume is at a moderate high intensity, and the rest is low intensity. Lifting-wise, I'm planning a 2-month phase of hypertrophy for weight loss, 2 to 3 months of strength, 1 to 2 months of maintenance. Thanks for being excellent. James.
Yeah, so when you're doing a lot of endurance training, you kind of get a 1-2 punch on the resistance training side of things. The first one is depending on what modality that you're using, that like, for example, running, your legs already take an immediate hit in terms of how much training you can do. So it's a local factor, right? Really the big issue though, when you're doing a lot of cardio is the systemic factor. So you basically take your MRV, if you were just doing only weight training, you start adding cardio and your systemic MRV starts doing this, the more cardio you start adding, right? In terms of how much weight training you can tolerate, because you're adding in training from another source. So if you were to look at it as like total MRV, it would stay the same. But if you're looking at like, okay, how much weight training can I do? It's coming down as, cardio's going up. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch in terms of local and systemic. So ultimately there's a couple different options. If you're going to do a cut, I wouldn't push the cardio as hard as you can. That way you can at least train hypertrophy enough to maintain your muscle mass as you lose weight. And then kind of as you start transitioning into your strength E type stuff, you might consider just training your resistance training stuff down to maintenance volumes if you find that the cardio stuff is really, really wiping you out and or that you're not able to express some of the strength that you normally would, numbers that you would normally hit. So I wish there was like a solid answer, like reduce your sets by X number, but there's really not. It's a lot of guess and check, and you just kind of see where you're going. So depending on how much cardio you're doing, you might be able to keep in like an MEV level of strength work, which would be awesome. But if you're doing a lot of cardio, like running, swimming, and rucking, at that point, my recommendation would be to think about just going down to MV on your strength stuff, because the swimming, rucking, and running is substantial. I mean, that's a lot, especially the rucking is going to wear you out systemically. And it's a great form of cardio, but there's not much you can do. There's not much you can do except for guess and check. So at that point, I would go to MV, do your best, and go from there.
Good answer. All right. Matt Malloy says, hi, docs, a couple of quick questions. I am a former D1 sprinter who has gotten into bodybuilding. Because I'm an outlier in terms of muscle fiber composition for many muscle groups, I was wondering what advice you had for people like me who are predominantly fast twitch. When it comes to training, any general observations of fast twitch athletes you've made over the years that can be beneficial? Should we be doing anything differently when it comes to frequency, rep ranges, exercise selection, proximity to failure, rest times, position, etc.? Yes! Oh my God, I'm glad you asked this question. So here's the deal. Anything when it comes to frequency. Yes, lower frequency will benefit you because your muscles will probably take more time to recover than the average person. Rep ranges, you should probably bias your reps more into the 5 to 10 and 10 to 15 range and less into the other ranges. But your own individual stimulus to fatigue ratio exploration should confirm that. And if it doesn't, you should bias them wherever your SFR leads. Exercise selection, something that allows you to generate high forces. Compound heavy basics usually work really, really well for fast twitch individuals, and a lot of times isolation movements just kind of lost on them because they can't even get their mojo going and produce a ton of force. So like for you, yeah, you might grow bigger shoulders with lateral raises, but some upright rows or something like that, something more dynamic might actually grow your shoulders a bit more. Proximity to failure probably doesn't change, although you have to really, really respect the RIR more than people who are slower twitch. Slower twitch people, they, they don't require a lot of neural drive to activate everything. They don't do much damage training, and they recover really quick, so they can do like 1 RIR and 0 RIR training weeks and weeks and weeks and be fine. You won't be able to do that. So really start at 3 RIR and slowly progress. Rest times, you need more rest, and if you rest longer, you're going to have much better performance and much better recruitment and much better growth. For someone really, really fast twitch, I wouldn't fuck around with 30-second rest kind of bullshit because it doesn't work. No. And for periodization, the standard periodization applies. You just sort of start all these values a little bit lower, and you may increase frequency over the block, and you may increase the higher rep range utilization, but not by as much as some other people would. So you basically, your bodybuilding is going to look a lot more like powerlifting than the average bodybuilders.
Yeah, on that point on frequency, I'm glad you brought that up, because you might not be paralleling a lot of the stuff that you might see on the RP hypertrophy hub, where it's like, oh, okay, I'm training quads 4 times a week.
2 times a week.
2 times a week, right? So you'll be lucky to go up, like a half a day in frequency on something if you have really fast twitch quads, for example.
I have another one. Your per session volume should start out very, very low, because you're going to be really, really responsive to it. And your journey from MEV to MRV in each cycle will probably be more benefited by being load progression than a set progression. So you should definitely add sets if you're just not getting sore, not getting a pump or whatever. But if things are pretty good from the soreness and pump perspective, just add load slowly. Don't add a ton of sets, because you will get most of your growth with lower volumes than most of the people compared to you will with slower fiber types. Whereas people who are really slower twitch, good God, you need to smash them with volume and add, because they just adapt to volume super quickly, and they can benefit from more usually. Your U-shaped curve for volume exposure is probably going to be on the lower end of things. Because if we're talking about sets per session, of course you go by recovery and performance and soreness and pump, but I would expect you to get your best results in between 3 to 6 working sets per session per muscle group, not in the 6 to 12 working sets per muscle group range. Real fast twitch guys, you give them 3 heavy sets of squats, and 3 sets of squats in the 5 to 10 range, and then 3 sets of leg presses in the 10 to 15 range, and they are fucked and just growing max, and they're pumped to shit, and they're sore as fuck, and there's no going up from there. So when you see other per session volumes, people doing 15 sets per session per back, like, yeah, that's nice. That ain't gonna be you. And the stronger you get, the less it's gonna be you. So just keep that in mind. You're gonna want to gravitate a little bit more to that HIIT style of training, less frequency, less exposure set-wise, not necessarily closer to failure, because you also have to respect that as well. Your training is going to look on paper very easy, but because you're more fast twitch, you're going to gain strength so fast, you're going to get so strong that it'll be quote unquote look easy with hundreds and hundreds of pounds, versus some of the people that do 15 sets of workout with an average of 80 pounds. And it's like, okay, you could actually do their workout in 5 minutes if you wanted to.
Yeah, and just so if anyone was kind of tuning in and out listening to this, just to clarify something so people don't get the wrong idea, we might see somebody increasing their intensity on this progression more because it's so easy to overshoot also with the volume, because their MEVs are already so low. Adding a set or two might actually just take them right over the edge. So if anybody's like, Dr. Mike, I thought you said add sets week to week. What do you mean? That we're talking about like a very niche case here of somebody who's really, really fast twitch, and their volume load progression will actually just come from weight on the bar. And that's just enough to keep it going, rather than adding a set, which might be way too much. Overreach, no good.
Number 2, what are your thoughts on direct adductor training? Worth it? Waste of time is somewhere between. The adductors are pretty large muscles, from my understanding.
We gotta get the thigh master action.
That's right. And
good girl, bad girl machine.
Really round out how your legs look when viewing them from the front. Are squat variants enough to actually grow the adductors, or should we be hitting them directly if it's worth training them at all? So actually, this is a question that you have to answer for yourself. For some people, training adductors, they can do extra volume, and they need the extra volume, and they actually get a benefit from it. Some people involve the adductors so much squatting that adductors may be a limiting factor for them in the recovery for squatting. They actually have to do things like leg extensions and close stance leg presses, and do very few lunges or anything like that to keep their adductors within their MRV, which I'm in that case actually. So it's really a guess and check kind of thing. Explore. There's no categorical answer to that. I will say though, my average answer is when you squat deep with the appropriate stances and do lunges for glutes and hip thrusts, and when you do deep leg presses and hack squats, I would say my rough, stupid, off-the-cuff guess is 90% of cases, no additional adductor work is ever necessary. James?
I agree. And you might actually find the same movement with different variations, completely different. So I've experienced this myself. Cambered bar squats, no big deal on the adductors. Switch over to barbell high bar squats. My MEV is like one set because my adductors become a limiting factor. Even after having squatted cam bar for months and months and months, that particular variation causes that to be a limiting factor. That might just be something unconsciously that I'm doing. Maybe not, who knows, but you will find that that might be the case. So I think for, like Mike said, like 90% of people, if you're doing some kind of normal squat variation, you probably got that covered. And, you know, I have a really hard time making a case for somebody. Like, I don't know what a situation would arise where I'd be like, you know what, those adductors, man, we got to do something about this. This is fucked. You know what I mean? Like, when has that ever happened? Never. Unless you're like one of those femdom ladies who are trying to crush watermelons. That might be a situation where I'd be like, you know what, we gotta work on this a little bit.
Crush this watermelon. She's like, I can't. You're like,
it's fucking adductors.
Excusable.
Get on that cable stack.
God. All right, number 3, more of a clarification question. My understanding is that when training at MAV, we should see the biggest performance increases, all else being equal, because we're getting the most hypertrophic stimulus relative to fatigue generated. No. MAV is maximum adaptive volume, not best SFR. Those are two different things. But we'll get to that in a sec. At MAV, we should see smaller increases because the hypertrophic stimulus is smaller, even though there is less fatigue. In the MRV, we should see no increases in performance because the fatigue is so high despite a very large hypertrophic stimulus. Am I understanding this correctly? So over the mesocycle average, so if you take a whole mesocycle and you say on average we trained at MAV, yes, you would see the biggest performance increases after the deload and the cumulative fatigue has come down, right? That's completely correct. And MAV average of the mesocycle does in fact have the highest stimulus, period. And it doesn't matter relative to fatigue generated because the deload clears the fatigue anyway. If you want to have the higher stimulus relative to fatigue generated, you should probably train close to MEV the entire time. You would accumulate very little fatigue, but you also wouldn't be able to grow at all. Your stimulus to fatigue ratio would be sweet, but it'd be like, yeah, like if you do this for another 150 years, you'll be Mr. Olympia. I'd be like, I don't have 150 years, I have 10, right? So that's the technical answer there. And then he says, if so, what do you think about only tracking performance increases determine if you're at MEV, MAV, MRV instead of tracking performance increases in addition to pump, soreness, RP, et cetera? It seems like performance increases are the best correlation we have to muscle growth based on recovery adaptive model. Things like pumps and soreness might be a little bit more subjective and variable. So it's a really good point. The problem is, and this is something that Eric Helms and I have been going back and forth on in our various debates over volume, the fitness fatigue paradigm essentially guarantees that within a mesocycle, you're looking at a black box of attributing performance gains to anything. So at any one time, you actually have no idea if the performance gain you're exhibiting is from an increase in fitness or from a relative non-accumulation of fatigue, right? So you can't actually tell. Here's a really good case in point example. You do the following mesocycle, sets of 5 sets of something, then 3 sets of something, then 1 set of something, then deload, okay? What's your performance going to do? Your performance is going to be revolutionary. You're going to get the strongest you've ever been at the end of that mesocycle. Now, is that close to MAV? No, fuck no, it's way below it. It's actually like an MV. So what's happening is that your fatigue is dropping while your fitness is probably just the same. And then the paradigm there is that your preparedness is massive because it's the difference between fitness and fatigue. On the other hand, if you do a crazy cycle where you do shitload of volume and you're growing at your fastest ever under the hood, you could be accumulating so much fatigue that you get these tiny little improvements microcycle to microcycle in performance. And then the last microcycle, you don't even improve in performance. You're like, oh, that's my MRV. Then you deload. And within that mesocycle, you'd be like, wow, that was a shitty mesocycle. I trained wrong. And you would actually be making the opposite conclusion because here, let's take these 2 mesos we just lined up and let's add a deload week to the end of them. After the deload week for the 5-3-1 meso, I didn't mean to like.
Damn it!
Yeah, it just so happens, right? But that's the thing is 5-3-1 is not a hypertrophy program; it's a peaking program, right? After a deload week after that, you probably wouldn't get any stronger. You'd be the same. A deload week after this cycle of the accumulated volumes, you would get massively stronger after the deal will be because all that stimulus has gone to increasing your fitness, but also increase your fatigue, and then the fatigue drops and the stuff stays. So we absolutely should be tracking performance increases to determine MV, MAV, MRV 100% after each mesocycle is over. But that means we have to fly blind for an entire mesocycle, which is dumb as shit. We just don't have to do, because we can have some kind of, and you're right, subjective, not exactly perfect, some kind of hint. Imagine this world. You don't know if you're doing enough volume, okay? But you never get pumps, you never get sore, and you do a whole mesocycle, and then you find that your performance didn't increase after a deload. Did you not do enough volume? Yes, it was not enough. But motherfucker, you should have known that shit. You were barely even trying, right? Here's another one. You get pumps like you can't believe, can't move pumps. Soreness to the point where it overlaps to every single session you ever do. You're sore like literally for the entire 5 weeks. Did you do enough volume? Yes. Did you do too much? Yes, probably. So if you don't get stronger after that, like, dude, you were at MRV or above the entire time. So that way, performance has to be something. Performance is the only way to detect MRV within the mesocycle. But other than detecting MRV within the mesocycle, performance cannot be used comparatively to gauge rate of adaptation, because the fitness fatigue paradigm blocks everything out. Meso to meso to meso, after the deloads, it's the only way to gain progress. Because, like, for example, let's say you told James and I, look, I did 3 mesos with deloads back to back to back, and I gained no strength. Am I getting bigger? It would be like, fuck no, right? It'd be like, well, on this program, I got 15 pounds of strength on my reps for bench, and on this other program, I got 25 in the same time. Which one's better? It'd be like the 25 one, because after the deload, clearly there's some shit happening under the hood, right? But within microcycle to microcycle to microcycle, if you completely just choose to ignore soreness and pump and all this other perceptive measures, then you're flying sort of needlessly blind. That's it. And you could be fucking up it takes you a whole meso to find out you were fucking up. It shouldn't take that long.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Mike here. So the thing is, like, performance, of all the things that you could pick, performance probably would be the one if you could only pick one. But the problem is that you don't need to pick one, and picking one is kind of silly. There's no metric, whether we're talking about fatigue, performance, anything within those two spectrums. There's no one metric that tells you everything that you need to know. So, you know, our stance, and I've been a big advocate of this for a long time, is that if you're going to have some type of monitoring system, you should have a performance metric. You should have some type of physiological metric, whether that's a heart rate or even just taking some anthros or some body comps, anything
body
like
weight,
that's fine.
Yeah.
Body weight, yeah, that's fine. And a perceptive measure, whether that's just kind of like an RPE or like a Likert scale questionnaire, anything like that. Like, if you don't have one of each of those things, you're probably missing out on something.
Let me give you a quick example. Your performance is increasing meso to meso to meso. Your weight is stable or going up slowly, and you're getting sore every single time you train, but you recover comfortably with room to spare before your next session. That's your fucking checklist. Do you want to lob off any one of those? You know, like, imagine you're getting sore and healing on time, and imagine you're getting stronger, but you're getting smaller. Are you really confident that those are not neural gains, that you're gaining muscle? I wouldn't be. Imagine that you're, getting stronger and so on and so forth, but you're barely ever getting sore. Maybe you could be getting stronger if you actually challenge the muscle more. You could be getting even bigger. So all of those are, and of course, if you're not getting stronger at all, or you have no idea because you never check performance, well, good God, you're completely flying long-term blind, which is really, really stupid. So strength and performance is one of those things that's more of a long-term. It's more confirmatory as to whether or not you're on the right track. And it is the most objective and the most important, but we can do better than just checking it. Like, it's almost like saying, you'll know when you've arrived to your destination if you look around and there you are. Like, yeah, no shit, but turn by turn, you know what I'm saying? Probably, even if you have a map, it's good to sort of know where you are. Now, can you see your location from all those turns? No, but there are some hints along the way. I'll put you this way. Here's a really, really good example. You're driving, you live in the mountains in Colorado, and a friend invited you to a party down in the plains in Colorado. Okay. And you have the directions, but you're in Colorado, so the fucking satellite flips out all the time. There's not coverage on your phone. So I think I'm on the right road. Here's a question for you that would be like the equivalent of pump and soreness perceptive. Are you generally going downhill? Because if you're going uphill all the time and you have to ask yourself if you're on the right track, you're probably not. My friend lives 5,000 feet below me, but for the last half hour, I've been going uphill in a winding road. Am I on the right track? Do you need to get to a destination, finally open up the satellite and be like, oh shit, I've been driving the wrong direction for 30 minutes? Probably not. Just like if someone asks you, have you been training hard enough this last meso, and you never ever got sore or a pump, don't be surprised when the answer is no, you haven't been training hard enough at the end of it. You can do better than that.
For sure. This question made me think of the "Why not Zoidberg" meme.
The best political campaign ever.
Yeah.
Zoidberg. Oh my God, I got to start watching Futurama again. Zoidberg's the fucking man.
He's the man.
Quote unquote doctor. Like, are you a real Dr. Zoidberg? He's like, what is it to you?
I like when he accidentally cuts people's limbs off with his client.
So
with his
great. Or he assumes the humans have like squid-like physiology.
Yeah.
They don't. He's like, that's where your thorax should be. They're like, what? And they're like, oh, I guess that humans are different. Never mind. All right. And then he says, thank you for all your hard work. You have no idea how much your content has helped me. I appreciate you both.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Glad to hear that.
All right. Kartik's thing. It's the shortest question of all time.
This is actually more of a statement than anything.
Yeah. My goal is bodybuilding, and I have very.
I left it in. I couldn't help it. I was like, I was so tempted to just like let this one go, but I couldn't.
My goal is bodybuilding. I have very limited equipment at my gym. For legs, I only got squat rack and leg press. How can I rotate exercises? You know what I'm saying? You're going to have to rotate the shit between leg press and hack squat, my dude. But on a serious note, okay, you can do leg press with a wider stance, with a closer stance. You could do myo rep leg press. You could do regular leg press. You could do heavier leg press. You could do lighter leg press. And you could do all the same shit with squats, except for the myo rep squats might not work out so well for you. So I would focus on having those kinds of rotations, different positions, different foot widths and different rep schemes and some myo reps and stuff thrown in there, some supersets, and all of a sudden you've got years and years of variation to milk out.
Yeah. I mean, even just with the squat alone, you have dozens of potential variations just between like bar placement, foot placement, and implements that you could potentially use to do the squats. Like, there's no shortage of things, and not to mention even just like tempo variations, weight variations, stuff like that, pauses. You got a lot of room there with even just those two things.
All right. Areen Salam says, hey, doctors. And he has a couple of questions for us. Number one, James, I'm going to rapid fire these. Interrupt me if you need anything. It sounded like Trump for some reason.
You shouldn't be getting sore.
I know everything about pumps.
If
I made the pump.
Have bleach that we put into the COVID virus.
People think they know about hypertrophy. Eric Helms thinks he knows things, but he's an idiot.
Oh my God. James S. Trump versus Eric Helms in a debate. Eric would be all reasonable and polite. He'd be like, this is.
You know what? I watch your program and it's bad. Next question.
It's like no one's even asked a question. You're like, okay. All right. Number one. Can some muscles just not get sore? I feel like if I get a crazy burn and pump in my lats and delts, they just wouldn't be sore the other day, but my chest and quads can easily be sore. Yep, for a variety of reasons, some muscles get sore more easily than others and more regularly, which is why soreness is not the be-all, end-all of everything. So what we always say is if you are progressing in strength, meso to meso to meso, if you're getting great pumps and you feel like the muscle has lost a ton within a session, a ton of strength, then you're stimulating the fuck out of it, and it's okay if it doesn't ever get sore. The thing is that if you're not training with a high volume, if you don't get a huge burn, if you don't get really big pumps, and you're not getting sore, you're probably just not doing enough. On the other hand, if you're not getting crazy burn, you're not getting crazy pumps, but you are getting pretty fucking sore, we wouldn't do more than that. So soreness doesn't cover all the bases, but it covers some.
Yep.
Number two. We usually hear people say good or bad genetics in the sense of absolutes. Besides skeleton shape and muscle insertions, what factors determine good genetics? I'm going to have a YouTube video about that in some time. I've already written a PowerPoint for it. Two things that come to mind is initial conditions. How much muscle do you have to begin with? And potential rate of adaptation is how fast do you grow? And then a third one is your limit size, like number of muscle fiber cells you have and their full expanded size before the myonuclear domain ceiling caps them. That can those three alone can be different. So for example, you have someone that starts out really jacked, but they're not very growth responsive and their muscle cell number is very low, then they won't get that much bigger. but you have someone that starts out pretty small and they have a crazy growth response and a shitload of satellite cells, then they can actually get fucking enormous. The best genetics are someone that starts out big, has a great growth response, and has a huge satellite cell pool. Those people get the biggest. And then, of course, testosterone, myostatin, all those other factors contribute incrementally along the way. So there's tons of things. There's no such thing as good and bad genetics. That's a fucking wild fallacy. Their genetics is a spectrum. It's normally distributed. Most people are pretty average at gaining muscle. Some people are real shit, but those people are pretty rare. And some people are gods, and those people are pretty rare, and their names are Jared Feather.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the psychological basis for genetics in this case either, which plays, I would say, just a very not an equal role, but a very large role as well.
Do you have the work proclivity psychology to actually do a program? Because if you don't, it doesn't fucking matter how good your genetics are.
Yeah, or do you even have any interest in it at all? Like,
yeah. All right, number 3. I'm 167 pounds, at 12 to 13% body fat, 175 centimeters, with 60 months of training. I don't have skinny genetics, but I have no problem staying at that fat mass. And ever I started training for muscle size, just the first week of training is like I haven't gained any measurable fat. Could that be science that I can eat more and gain more, or by some miracle I'm eating the perfect amount? It's definitely not. I don't know what the perfect amount means, but if you are maintaining a lean physique, training hard and eating well, but you want to gain weight, eat a little bit more to gain weight. You're only going to find out one way or another. And it's okay, you gain a little bit of fat when you gain weight. Just when you start gaining too much fat, cut it off, maintain for a bit, diet off the fat, and repeat the cycle. That's it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if you're not gaining fat at some point, something's definitely wrong and you're kidding yourself. You know what I mean? At that point, you might be being a little fat phobic on the diet side of things. And I'm not saying you should become fucking Jabba the Hutt, but at the same, if you do 2 months and you don't gain any appreciable fat, it's like, okay, that seems kind of odd.
James, you and I are going to leave the location and the name of this person out, but James and I had an interaction with a person once who was like, that person weighed like 120 pounds, and they were like, I eat like 4,500 calories a day and I can't gain weight. And James and I like rolled our eyes so hard that our eyes left our heads and met, and I got James's eyes and he got mine. It was like, and then Dr. Melissa Davis was with us, and she just had a temporary death. She just fell backwards and hit her head. So it was like, yeah, word up. You know what I'm saying? It was a terrible problem you got there.
Yeah, most people who say that are people who will eat like one really
liars.
Well, that too. That's the more obvious thing. But they'll also eat like one big meal a day and think that they're eating like all these calories, but then they don't eat the rest of the day. And so the reality is they're not actually accruing that much calories throughout.
Yeah, 100%. Number 4, I can grow my calves with 3 sets a week, and I'm wondering if I should try 0 sets a week and see if they stay the same. I walk 12,000 steps just for fun and when I feel like it. So only if you want to know if your maintenance volume is 0, but it might be. But if you want to keep your calves growing, I would just say stick within that lower set range, unless you want them to go faster and then experiment with slightly higher volumes incrementally.
It depends on like if you want to deal with calves or not. Like I personally don't want to deal with calves anymore. I hate training calves, and some people like having big calves. It's up to you.
Number 6. So about the isometric trap holds, I moved to a new gym where they don't have trap bars or machine shrugs and barbell shrugs, and I don't feel my traps at all when I end the movement. I feel like I'm just tired, so I'm resorting back to the isometric hold for a while, and I have 2 questions. 1, should I just aim at increasing time each week, or weights and sets? Both. All 3.
Honestly, I can't even say that because I think it's still a waste. It's one of those things where I don't know, it's like, how do I make something shitty less shitty? I'm like, well, why don't you just not do the shitty thing?
Number 2.
You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm not trying to be an ass.
Yeah. Well, when do I know where to stop the set? LOL, if I go to failure, failure hits when my traps tear apart. Well, it's not going to hit when your traps tear apart. I would objectively raise your shoulders to a certain height. So maybe stand in front of the mirror and pick like a speck on the mirror. And when you do this, your shoulder on the right-hand side and left touch a certain speck or touch a certain line. Stand in front of or behind a machine, like in a reflection, right? And then completely cover the machine behind you, just barely with your traps, and hold them. And then when you can see the machine again, that's failure because the traps have depressed to some extent. That's it. You've got to be objective.
And you could use something like a Smith machine too, which is really easy to see what you're doing, especially if there's a mirror, right? And something like that, you can just look at all the different pegs and stuff, and it's an easy reference point.
Yep. Yeah, very good point, James. All right. Update. Oh, he said, I literally owe you guys for all this information. You make me know how to improve on the one thing I love most. Yeah, you literally do owe us, motherfuckers.
Awesome.
So send $100 check payable to Extreme Hardcore Fitness Solutions, Halberg, Oregon, 55651 with R.E. Timothy Spencer. And just do that every month.
We need that money.
Timothy needs money. Update. The horse is named Dr. Mike Israel. Feels awkward to ride, so I just leash it.
Oh.
It's getting oddly sexual. Oddly.
Doesn't want to romp around?
I would love it if you rode me, Irene.
Ooh, damn.
Hey. Isn't that what horses say? All right. Ellie Paulin says, hello. My 60-year-old healthy father started exercising on the elliptical 5 months ago. He's doing 4 to 5 sessions a week, each 1.5 to 2 hours long. Good fucking God.
Oof.
At an average
Christ.
beats per minute of 140, which is 88% of his maximal heart rate. He perceives the effort as moderate and is never pushing himself. Dude, Dad has a gift. No, legit. Can he sustain that routine without looking at damaging effects on his heart? Damaging? He's going to become God sooner or later. I've been told that exercising for longer periods of time in this heart rate zone could be detrimental for heart health. It's pure, unadulterated bullshit. If your dad cleans up his diet a tiny bit, he's going to become lean as fuck, fit as shit. He's probably already well on his way to becoming fit as fuck anyway, and he might already be lean. If he perceives it as totally fine and not super fatiguing, dude, it's the healthiest shit you can fucking imagine. What you have to just talk to your dad about is for him not to psycho tough guy this, but if he feels tired, take a week off or take a week of maybe doing 30 minutes at 120 beats per minute, just some easy time, do some hiking, do some other stuff, take a little break, not fuck his joints up. But other than that, if he's just realistic with his fatigue perception, this is the healthiest. If we could have America and the rest of the Western world do what your dad is doing or work up to it over several years, I said not everyone's going to be able to do that 5 months into training. There would be almost no fucking heart disease for like another 600,000 people a year, and fucking cancer rates would fall by. This is amazing. Your dad is the fucking shit. Do not stop him from doing this. Just make sure he's realistic about his fatigue, both centrally and peripherally with regard to joints. But this is I'm telling you, heart health is literally improved to a huge extent by what he's doing, not damaged in the least. And if you have time, we shut it down the RP Plus component here, but if you want to pop into the YouTube at some point in a few weeks and just let us know, remind us that who you were, let us know where you found that this is bad for the heart type of bullshit, because I really like to see what the fuck's figuring that out.
I think I know what she's talking about. I was going to pop in on that. So there is like a very small grain of truth. It's just not in the same context here. So doing a lot of hard cardiovascular training can actually have negative effects on heart health, just like doing a lot of hard muscle training can eventually cause a lot of problems to your muscle. It's the same idea. But that's really an issue of like systemically overreaching and doing.
You'll know it.
It's like really, really, this is something that like elite endurance athletes can run into. They'll start seeing problems with their heart rate variability and stuff like that. What you're doing what your father is doing is nowhere near the ballpark of that, so long as that he's, like Mike said, realistic with his perceptions of fatigue and recovery. And if he's cruising and otherwise good, no problems at all. It's really when you start pushing the limits of how much endurance training that you can tolerate, and at very, very high intensities, relatively speaking, that's when you can start running into some issues. But it's no different. It's the same shit that we talk about, MRV, MEV, all that. It's the same thing repackaged in a slightly different modality. So if you're conscious of these things, you don't have to worry about it too much.
All right, Ansh. No longer do we get Anshuman Radhakrishnan. Just one.
It's just me being lazy.
He put in his whole name?
His name shows up, his full name shows up on the thing.
Everyone knows.
You got a long name. I don't want to type it out, and then I have to always go back and make sure I'm not misspelling it.
And if you don't know who Ansh is, soon your world will.
You will.
You know how the coming of the comet portends calamity? Ain't no comet, motherfucker. That's Anshuman Radhakrishnan headed to your fucking planet, bro.
Oh my God.
He says, and then he asks us a question that has already been asked, so we'll just summarize it really quickly. Do you guys think it's ever worth to forego training a muscle group in a certain rep range due to poor SFR? For example, I really struggle to hear my rear delts and triceps in the 5 to 10 range. Close grip bench. So here's actually a cool thing for you, Anj. You already hit your rear delts and triceps in the 5 to 10 range because you do pulling movements and pushing movements in the 5 to 10 range, which hit your rear delts and triceps like crazy. Okay, so good news is you're already doing that. So it's kind of a trick answer. Close grip benching stretches my chest much more than my triceps, for example, and face pulls or rear laterals turn into back movements more than anything else. In the 10 to 20, 20, 30 rep range, things are golden, sometimes even in the same exercise, but the 5 to 10 rep range, I can't perceive anything that happens. Oh, yes. Ansh, we've actually answered this question already before. The answer is twofold. One, if you're doing nothing to expose the muscle at all in any compound movements or anything else, any assistance moves to a certain rep range, it's totally fine to forego it for some time, multiple mesos, but every now and again, every few blocks, come around to trying something, maybe at the high end or the low end of that rep range that you never feel, and see if maybe in a new exercise, new technique, it works out. Because you might be pleasantly surprised, like, oh, wow, I actually feel it now. This is super cool. So don't ever write it off forever, but you can write it off for like half a year or a year at a time. But to answer your question more directly, you're not James, are those the doggies?
Oh yeah, they're barking.
Oh, the barking doggies. When did they start barking?
They started immediately. Like as soon as we took them home, they were like, bark, 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 bark.
Oh, they're talking.
The female's gotten fucking huge. Like she's just been she's already gained like almost 3 pounds since we got her, and she only started at like 10. So she's gaining like 33% of her body weight.
Do they eat Lowe's food?
No, we have there's like a low zone in the house, so that Lowe's stuff is always safe and he can escape if he wants to. But they've been interacting a lot. Lowe's tries to eat their food, but he doesn't like it. He's like, oh.
Sorry. Okay, so where was I? You're already in most muscle groups. You're already training things in all the rep ranges. It's the real question is with dedicated isolation movements, are you training with all rep ranges? And the answer there is no, not necessarily. So remember, back work and pushing and pulling work generally already trains your rear and front delts with the hardcore heavy volume that they're going to need, and then everything on top of that is isolation. And a lot of times it's not the rep range there, it's the technique breaks down completely if you try to go heavier, which is why it ends up being a poor situation. Or the time, because it's such a short amplitude exercise, then the time spent generating tension is so small that you just don't get close to your local muscular volume nearly enough. But other than that, it's good to go. And then most of the time, you don't have a problem with the rep ranges. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, you can for months at a time even get off the isolation wagon for some muscle groups, but come back every now and again and see if there's anything there.
Yeah, and you can always bias towards the top end of this, like the 8 to 10 kind of reps if you feel like you get something out of that rather than nothing.
All right. This is quite a few questions. I'm going to rapid fire these. Cool, James?
Yeah, fire away.
Mantas Pilipoutis says, hello, doctors. I hope it won't be hard for you to answer approximately one question.
I can tell if I'm mad about that or not. Clearly, it was sarcasm.
It's that Lithuanian sarcasm everyone loves.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Jonas Sabiscus. I have an injured calf muscle, but I feel good. You're like, what?
What? Yeah.
All right. Number one, why is Tazio Il Biondo one of the best people at pull-ups in the world, but he does not look like he lifts? Is explainable by a large portion of slow twitch muscle fibers. No clue, don't know who he is, but I suspect that fiber type, neural recruitment abilities, and sometimes anatomical insertions and origins really, really determine stuff. So if we take your lats and we position them like 1 centimeter or even half a centimeter further down the humerus, your pulling strength increases by like some fucking ungodly amount, which is why like chimps are actually quite slow if you try to get them to run. But humans are the fastest of the primates on foot, but chimps are super fucking strong because they're anatomically leveraged just a bit further from the joint, which means they're shitty at producing power and speed, but their strength is really high. So like 150-pound chimp, it looks like you look like you could fuck it up. It might be actually stronger than you, which is a scary thought. Chimps are scary as fuck. They smile a lot, but that's actually them baring their teeth. I don't like them. I don't ever want to be around monkeys ever.
I mean, they can literally rip each other to pieces. It's very scary.
Yeah, and they go through for the face, eyes, and nuts when they fight you. So it's just like some kind of that's like a demon. I'm pretty sure that's how demons came to be mythologized.
Yeah. I don't know who this guy is either, so I don't really have anything else to input. But there's always things like power to weight ratios, anthropometry, like Mike said, stuff like that. Who knows?
Number 2, is there any correlation between time it takes to heal wounds and the ability to recover versus training? Absolutely. Here's a correlation: protein intake. My wife was actually telling me, my wife's a medical doctor, that they scale protein requirements in the hospital based on how big your wound is that you're coming in to heal. And if you have a huge wound, like internal wound, they give you more protein. So I was just talking about you, honey. I'm at a webinar. So basically, what else does protein intake help? Well, it helps recovery from training. So, and probably, when you get sick, you can't recover from training as much because more is going to wound healing and things like that. And I think genetically underlying, the same people that can recover quickly from wound healing probably better recovered from training. And there's a lot of overlap there because a lot of those basic systems are the same. Not all of them, but a lot of them are the same.
Yeah, so like theoretically, yes, I've never seen a single paper. So when you say a correlation, you have that would indicate like that was statistically measured, right? And so from on my end, I have not seen anything, but like Dr. Mike says, a lot of those systems overlap. So it would make sense. And if I read a paper that said that, I'd be like, yeah, that seems like it would make a lot of sense. But I personally have not, so I can't really comment on that.
3, why does nobody do cluster sets for strength training? Tons of people do cluster sets for strength training. Not sure where that came from. Number 4, how should your preparedness fluctuate in the mesocycle? Should you be in the best shape right after deload when starting a new training block? Yes. Or a few microcycles in once you've gotten the real swag of the movements. But you should definitely be not in your highest preparedness at the end of a mesocycle, because if you're high preparedness at the end, what is it that you're actually doing to incur fatigue? You're probably not training hard enough. Number 5, should I be concerned about overreaching if I see a drop of explosiveness, even though my strength is steadily climbing up? Yes, you should. James and I have an article that I've actually just transferred into a YouTube video I'm going to be recording in probably a few months because we have such a huge backlog of videos we're putting out. Fatigue indicators and how to use them on Juggernaut Strength. And we described for strength training, explosiveness is a leading indicator of fatigue. So you could still be getting stronger, but your explosiveness, once it starts to go down, you can tell that you're not at your MRV yet, but it's coming soon. So it's one of those, like, you don't just ignore it. You're like, ooh, I feel a little slower. Okay, I have 1 or 2 weeks left, or I better manage my fatigue pretty well. So.
And it also depends on what you're training for. Like if you're training for hypertrophy, then if your explosiveness goes down, that's like a completely normal trade-off at that point, and it might have very little impact on what you're doing. But as Mike said, it is a leading indicator that you are becoming fatigued. But that's one of those kind of like a no-brainer ones where you're like, man, I can't jump as high. It's like, yeah, you did fucking 8 sets of quads yesterday.
Number 6, what should a usual decrease in performance when eliminating the stress shortening cycle? My broad jump is 315 centimeters, seated broad jump is 305. Is that difference too small? I'm not actually sure. It actually depends. The difference is very, very lift and exertion specific. So if the stress shortening cycle impacts some things much more than others, I'm not sure. James, do you know anything about this for the broad jump?
I'm sorry, I spaced out for a second. I gotta reread it.
Stress shortening cycle versus no stress shortening cycle. What's the typical difference there? And I said it's very specific to the lift or the exercise.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And it's also going to be specific to how the person performs a lot of those techniques. Some people get more out of the elastic component. Some people get more out of just like the raw force generation component. It's hard to say.
Number 7, it takes me 260 milliseconds to perform a broad jump beginning with counter movement to leaving the ground. The plyometric exercises that have about 100 milliseconds of contact time have a noteworthy carryover to my broad jump. Yeah, anything that has a counter movement component can be improved by plyometrics. Although plyometrics technically improve your rebound much better than they improve your ability to do a counter movement. So yes, there absolutely will be an increase. The increase will be greatest when you're already really, really muscular and really, really strong. And it won't be a huge improvement if you just start doing plyos when you're not that strong. James?
Yeah, like the ground contact time is something that's useful for things like sprinting. In terms of just doing like a broad jump, I wouldn't, because the ground contact time on a broad jump is massive because you're just sitting there winding up and then leaping. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that particular metric for a broad jump.
Number 8, some people like to recommend triphasic training for athletic activities. Is it preferable to conventional macrocycle that James discussed in applied periodization training or applied periodization lectures? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Triphasic training is a bullshit advertising term for some dog shit program that's not even a fucking program. It's a fucking gimmick book. Sorry, I was going to be civil about this. But I don't know what the fuck triphasic. I've seen students present it to me when I was a professor as a noteworthy training strategy. It makes no internal or external sense as far as I can tell. So.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly couldn't even tell you what it is, so I'm not really sure. I mean, I've heard of it, and it's come in and out of my world a few times, but I've never looked at it very seriously. So I don't know.
I haven't. It's mostly dog shit.
I
Number
take
9.
Dr. Mike's word on that.
Number 9, how does the curve of a recovery window look? Is there a big difference if you relax just when you step out of the gym or after an hour? Generally speaking, it depends on how much stress you're incurring in that hour. The sooner you can relax, the better. And the more stress you experience before you get a chance to relax, the more deleterious it is to hypertrophic processes. Now remember, recovery occurs over the course of days. So 1 hour is not going to make a huge difference. But the more you can relax, the better. And the more you can make non-relaxing things relaxing, the better. So for example, if you are in a car driving home after workout for 45 minutes or something like that, best to throw on your favorite podcasts or music and relax and not get pissed off at the traffic, than get really pissed off and angry and try to drive fast, because that will make a small difference in your performance.
Yeah, so I agree with Mike here. I think it's one of those where we would say there's a practical significance. Is it something that would be like a statistically significant difference? Probably not, because there's too many factors involved in recovery, like lifestyle, training, nutrition, other, it's impossible to measure.
Should unilateral exercise be involved in my training if I train for the broad jump? James?
It depends on what you mean. Like, are you talking about like just doing unilateral leg training or anything like that? I mean, so the broad jump is a bilateral exercise. So in that sense, you would not necessarily need to, although you can get plenty of explosive training out of doing some unilateral stuff. I would say, I think Dr. Mike largely shares the same opinion on training in general. I think the majority of your training should come from bilateral stuff. You should have some stuff that's high force output. And the way that you do that is, of course, by doing bilateral. You should have some high power output stuff. And big surprise, how do you generate high power output? Bilateral. And you can supplement some unilateral stuff if you feel like you get a really, really good SFR stimulus out of it. But other than that, I think the majority of your work should probably be bilateral. It would be different if you said, sorry, I was just thinking like, it might be different if it was like a long jump, right? Where you sprint up and then you bound off of a leg. So you have the sprint component, which might benefit from unilateral training, and kind of a single leg bound, which might benefit. But a broad jump, it has like a massive ground contact time. The impulse is fucking huge just because you're winding up, squatting, and then leap. I mean, so I'm just not seeing it. Yeah. Somebody could make a case to me and say, yeah, I get a lot out of this particular like one-legged jump or bound or sprint, and I'd say, okay, that's fine. But for the most part, if I saw a program that didn't have a lot of high bar squats and like maybe like clean variations, something like that, I would be very suspicious.
Right. Are there any drawbacks to training only the range of motion that is required for the broad jump? I do box and pin squats. My ETG squat is so weak that I have to majorly slow down to get out of the hole, but I accelerate frequently fast when I pass parallel, which almost leads to a jump squat. So the one downside is your stimulus to fatigue ratio for hypertrophy, and maybe even for general strength improvement, could be higher in a full squat because you have to use less load to get the same effect, less bar load, less wobbly on the walkout, and so on and so forth. So you can absolutely do mostly, if not wholly, box and pin squats when you get closer to your basic strength and peaking phases. But in hypertrophy phases and a much of basic strength, fuller squats are probably going to make a little bit more sense for you.
Yeah, I agree. That would be something you could periodize with your squat movements, where you have periods of fuller range of motion, and then as you get closer and closer to whenever it is that you want to do your jump, you could start training specific ranges of motion.
There's direct research to confirm this in multiple studies. Full ROM groups gain more strength in partial ROM exercises than partial ROM groups, because the partial ROM group is just not much volume and it's not much hypertrophic stimulus, so they gain so little muscle, they end up not getting much stronger, even though the specificity is good. So
yeah.
It's one of those where that's why we rank the training principles, and there's not one that is like the training principle. Like if your overload is incredible and your fatigue management is incredible, even a lower specificity can lead to better overall gains than if your specificity is 100%, but your overload sucks and your fatigue management sucks. That's basically this example. 12 is rapid decrease of performance, each set a sign of underlying fatigue. I would submit that it is not just a sign of underlying fatigue. It is a literal measurement of fatigue. That is exactly what fatigue is a decrease in performance. And subsequent performances, it says sometimes my first set goes through the roof, but subsequent sets get much worse than usually. Yeah, it's a sign of underlying fatigue. Now that fatigue might go down if you rested longer, but there's only so much of that it saves. So absolutely it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, fatigue is literally a performance decrement from doing something at that point. That's what you did something, and then the next one's got worse. Easy peasy.
Number 13, I noticed that if I do a slightly hard voluminous workout, it gets much harder to fall asleep for a few days. Usually I fall asleep in 30 minutes after a hard workout. It takes roughly 2 hours. This is normal. I work 6 hours before I go to sleep. Yeah, I would say it's normal. Some people are more sensitive to it than others, but you seem very sensitive. And potentially I would examine if those workouts aren't very, very over the top too hard. But other than that, I think it's normal. That's part of what's going on.
Yeah, and that's a very common overreaching symptom is restlessness and inability to get high quality or quantity sleep. So what you might be also doing is acutely overreaching on some of those workouts, and that is a common symptom. I would say if it's something that's happening regularly, you might consider backing down some of those workouts a little bit.
Number 14, how am I supposed to take naps? Is that a trainable skill? You're not supposed to take naps, but if you are going to take them, you take them for 20 to 45 minutes at a time. This is a trainable skill, yes, but it's not needed. I have never fallen asleep during a day in less than 2 hours. Yeah, it's totally fine. Look, nobody needs naps. The nap advice that James and I give for people are people who insist on taking them and really, really like them. We can optimize them by making them of a good length of this and that and making them their show at the right time so they don't interfere with the sleep cycle at all and get the most out of them. But if you're a person who doesn't take naps, then you're not missing out on a fucking thing. Most people just don't need naps, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Does micro-loading help to progress on lifts, which I wonder at max under 50K? Would it be better doing bigger jumps but stay within the same weight for longer? No, either one of those is totally fine. Just make sure that you're not ever training in such a way that's too easy. Remember, you can also progress in repetitions. That's another mode of progress. But for strength progress with smaller lifts, yeah, I think micro-loading is totally fine.
Yeah, I think it's fine too. It just is also one of those things that can get needlessly fussy, whereas like adding reps is very simple and practical.
Number 16, I feel that I should take a deload, but I know after 3 weeks, I'll have a stressful week, which will mess up my training. Should I deload twice or maybe do a slight reduction of volume in the beginning and a completely deload in the stressful week? I would say that last part is probably your best bet. Slight reduction, enough of a reduction to buy you another 2 weeks of training and then deload finally in the stressful week.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Fuck, hold on. Sneeze. Okay, number 17, how to know when an overreaching becomes non-functional. When you recover from it, but your performance does not improve. It's something you find out by trial and error. So start overreaching on the easier side, just a little bit overreaching, and see if you increase any more gain by adding amounts of overreaching. So overreach for 3 days once, and then try to overreach for 5 days. And then if the 5 days doesn't improve your performance over the 3 days, don't try 7. But if the 5 days improves your performance radically over the 3 days, then try a 7-day overreach. And then after the 7, if it's roughly equivalent to the 5, I just would go back to the 5. If the 7 is under the 5 performance-wise, you have non-functionally overreached, or to be more clear, less functionally overreached, and then I wouldn't go any further.
And generally, we will call things non-functional overreaching when they were unplanned and not accounted for, right? So you're essentially in a state that you did not plan on being in. It could be, in this case, it's in the bad side. So you could also say you have non-functional overreaching when you come into a session that you planned on, maybe you're wearing it a little bit, but you plan on having a fairly normal training session and you totally bombed, right? That's an example. And then everything else, like Dr. Mike said.
If you have an explosive lower body, is there a high chance that your whole body has a high proportion of fast twitch muscle fibers? Yes, higher chance than average, absolutely, but not guaranteed. This is something you can find out very easily, though. So, number 19, how fast does MEV change in a monocycle? Is the change roughly linear? James and I have estimated, most of the folks we've trained, that MEV with very similar movements, rep ranges, and volumes, etc., probably goes up by 1 or 2 sets every mesocycle. Very, very tiny. Okay, so your MEV stays your MEV for essentially a mesocycle and might go up a little bit into the next meso. So it's one of those things, like if your MEV at the beginning of a block is 10, your MEV might be 13 or 14 at the end of that block, which is like 3 mesos in a row. And that's just because you've been using the same exercises and so on and so forth. And it might even not be that high. It might be like 12 or something like that. You just have to just keep an eye on it. That being said, the MEV is still the MEV. So you don't ever want to really, on purpose, without giving a lot of thought, train at your MEV the entire time. So people say like, well, MEV doesn't go up that fast, so I can just do 10 sets every week. Like, yeah, if you want minimum gains, yes, you can. But you probably don't want minimum gains. So.
Yeah. Check out How Much Should I Train too if you want more information on that kind of stuff.
Is a proper good morning done only low bar? No, absolutely not. High bar good mornings are a thing. You can check out my Instagram. I do them all the time. So,
sometimes the low bar one just puts a lot of leveraging on the glutes too, and you don't really get to train the hamstrings as much.
Yep. And sometimes it just hurts your shoulders. 21. Is it bad to get bruises at the contact point when doing Olympic cleans? Probably not. I think a lot of people get that, especially at first. James, any
I think there's probably a point of diminishing returns where you're displacing your hips so far forward that the amount of force is not actually going up. You're actually pushing forward. And somebody like Max Ada is probably a better person to ask about that. My understanding is like a little bit of contact there is not a big deal, and probably a little bit of bruising or marks. But if you're really getting a lot of hit on that, you probably are displacing your forces in the wrong directions.
Should feet training be included to improve broad jump? Does the flexibility of feet matter a lot? No clue, James.
I honestly don't know, and my opinion would be whatever training that you need in your feet, you get from broad jump training.
23, should I worry about the fatigue caused by landing in a broad jump? Absolutely, 100%. Landing fatigue is fucking massive. The number of landings you take is actually what a lot of people in sports science measure versus how many takeoffs you take. So, for example, if you're doing training where you're a gymnast and you do a crazy jump over some kind of implement, but you land into a foam ball pit, they're really you can do a whole lot of those and be totally fine. And there's only so many landings you can have, even if you're not powering the landings. If you're a cheerleader and you get hoisted up on someone's shoulders and then they push you, you do a tuck and then you land, there's only so many of them shits you got per any 1 unit of time. So absolutely you should be worried about it, like in the sense, like Jewish worry, something that never leaves you. You just perennially walk around carrying like a giant fucking boulder, waiting to die. I'm just kidding. But seriously, you don't have to worry about it, but absolutely it should play into your training program design.
Yeah, I mean, the landing's the limiting factor on that exercise and its trainability.
Is a weighted vest training just a fun way to spice up your workouts? Does it provide unique PEP benefits? I think neither. Weighted vest training is good for when you need a weighted vest to do something. And other than that, weighted vest training is you just wanted to look like a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I mean, if you need weight to do like pull-ups and dips or something, or push-ups, like that's great. But they're like putting it on for a squat or something like that, to me is largely silly. There could be something there, but I certainly don't know what it is.
That's it, man. The end of RP Plus.
Oh, that's right. Are we calling it a day?
We're calling
on
it a
that?
day. And next time,
my goodness,
folks, next time, YouTube, like and comment under the questions that you think are the best. And we will get to we'll get to 10 questions each time. And we'll get to as many of the top questions as fall into that 10. Yeah, the YouTube algorithm sucks. It doesn't actually sort the highest responses all the way to the top every time, but we're going to choose from the top group of responses and make sure that we're not chronically missing any questions that are getting upvoted a lot.
Yeah, and also just let's be good community members too. Like there's going to be plenty of people who maybe haven't watched 3 years of webinars like many of you RP Plus people have, so no need to bash them if they ask something simple like, what's an MEV? Stuff like that. It's going to happen. Yeah, help them out. It's going to happen. There's no need to like shit on people. Like people want to post and ask questions. That's fine. We won't answer all of them, but there's no need to be, mean. Don't be mean. Come on now. Let's, man, I can't believe that's the last RP Plus one. Man, that's kind of funny.
Crazy. Times are changing.
Times are changing indeed. Folks, we're going to sign off for this one. So just one last time, remember, we're going to switch to YouTube. So you're going to go on the most recent episode of the webinar, which will be this one. We recorded this one on July 21st, so hopefully I think it'll be labeled that way. So that's when you're going to start posting your YouTube comments and questions, and then upvote, downvote, whatever you want. Don't downvote, that's mean. But upvote, comment, all that stuff. We'll get to it, and then that's how we're going to answer from this point on. So I'm Dr. James. He's Dr. Mike. We are signing off.